All right, guys, well, welcome to week number 2 of our hunger series. So last week we talked about honoring your hunger, and hopefully you've had a chance this week to look at the hunger scale and play around with that a bit. And then this week we're going to dive into a little bit more of the nutrition science side of it, and we're going to talk about managing hunger. So this is where I got to warn you, I geek out a little bit. I really love this stuff. I could talk about it all day. So I'm going to try to keep it condensed and then just give you some really easy takeaways that you can practice this week. So let me do a quick screen share. So again, just a quick recap last week in talking about honoring your hunger, because we don't want to suppress our hunger to a point where we trigger primal hunger, right? So when we have this great fear of food being taken away, even if it's like a choice we're making, our body doesn't know that we're suddenly drastically cutting back on food for, whatever reason, health or weight loss or whatever. It's like, did we fall in a well? Are we going through a famine? And that's when your body can start to shut down, and you have these certain hormones that are released that increase hunger to try to help you, like, hurry, get more food. We're going to survive this. Or your metabolism really shuts down. If you remember that study that they did with the men back in World War II, metabolism reduced by 40%. It took a really long time, like years, to get it back. So that's not what we want to do. We don't want to go to this drastic thing where we drastically cut back on calories. We just want to get to a place where we feel like we've got more of a flow to our eating. We feel calmer with our eating, and we're eating more most of the time for true hunger. So that's where, again, the hunger scale can be so helpful and such a great starting point. Just trying to stay as close to that sort of neutral spot throughout the day. We're going to allow for some hunger, no problem. We're going to obviously eat to satisfy, no problem. We're just trying not to go to those extremes. Okay, so let's take this to the next level, because this gets easier when we're eating in a way that also helps our body to be in a more stabilized state most of the time. So when I talk about balancing or managing hunger, one of the big things is looking at the 4 macronutrients. Really, technically, there's only 3 macronutrients: carbs, fats, and proteins. Vegetables are technically in the carbohydrate family, but a lot of times we pull them out because carbohydrates, typically, we think about them as an energy source, and vegetables, yes, they'll provide a little bit of energy, but not a ton. Vegetables, really, the main reason we want to include them is for the micronutrients, the vitamins and the minerals. So just a quick recap in case you don't know. Carbohydrates' main purpose is energy, right? They break it down into something called glucose, which we're talking about a lot today. It doesn't matter whether you're eating an apple or a candy bar or pasta or a sweet potato. Eventually, all carbohydrates break down into something called glucose, which is essentially blood sugar, okay? And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. It's just a matter of how quickly it converts and releases into our blood. When you're people talking about like complex carbs versus simple carbs, or slow releasing carbs, fast releasing carbs, that's what we're talking about. Proteins' main role in our body is building and repairing everything from cell membranes to your hair, to your nails, all the things. Muscles, obviously, that's a big part of it. And then fats are a secondary energy source. We store fat primarily to have extra energy, and that's a beautiful, wonderful thing. It also helps with some hormone regulation, and it helps with, particularly with certain vitamins, A, D, E, and K. Those are called fat-soluble vitamins, and those are really important vitamins, and we need some fat to help to, break those down and utilize those vitamins. So all of them are very important. Any diet that tells you to cut any of these out, be wary, be cautious. But obviously eating them in a balanced way can be really helpful for our body. I'm sure you've had this experience where the more, let's say, sugar you eat, the more sugar you want. There's actually a physiological reason for that, which again, we'll talk a little bit about today. It doesn't mean that sugar can't fit into your diet. It absolutely can. I'm a big fan of the phrase, all foods fit. So instead of taking foods that we really like and saying, I can never have them again, they're evil, they're bad, they're going to make me sick and fat and all that, we just look at like, how much do we want to have that in our diet, and how do we place it in our diet in a way that still helps us to feel good? That is, I think, a much better approach to this. Okay, so these are our macronutrients. And again, each very important. So I put this in the portal. It is in the recipe vault. This is a list through Precision Nutrition, and I like it to a degree. I would say that instead of taking their version and saying like, you have to follow what they're saying as far as eat more, eat some, eat less. You kind of start to create your own, right? By listening to your body and what foods feel good. But I think it's always nice to have a starting point. A lot of the people I work with, they're not even really sure, what exactly is a carb versus a fat versus a protein. So this is where I think this can be helpful. And I also like the idea that they're not eliminating here. They're just saying, hey, these are ones that you probably going to feel better for your body. These are the ones that maybe you want to be a little bit, more limiting on. And these are the ones we want to not eat quite as much, although tell my kids that because we do eat a lot of chicken fingers and chicken nuggets. So we're working on it. But that's where, take this with a grain of salt, so to speak. And again, create the list that works good for you. But hopefully from this, you'll just start to get a better idea of what are carbs, fats, proteins. Okay. And of course, vegetables, as much as we can, eating a wide variety of them. But again, this is where you don't want to choke down something that you absolutely hate. Like if you hate broccoli, hey, there's lots of other green vegetables that you can choose from. So don't feel like you have to choke down something that you really don't like, or, there's all sorts of different ways you can prepare vegetables. Do what feels good for you, and don't feel like there's one magic food. That's really an important thing here. There's not a magic food. I know people talk about superfoods all the time, but a wide variety is the way to go. Okay, so when we talk about this, we're talking about balance. And that is one of the ways that can really help us to manage hunger. Now, of course, there's the mindset side, right? So again, going to extremes, eliminating things, having a lot of guilt, shame, and fear around food usually never works. And it's interesting, the studies really show that, people will go to the doctor and the doctor say, if you don't change your diet, you're going to have a heart attack, or you're close to getting type 2 diabetes, you better cut these foods out. And time again, we see that it really doesn't work. And sometimes can even drive people to want to eat those foods more. So there is a way we can have a more balanced approach, and having that mindset is super important. But today I want to talk a little bit more about the physiological, because again, how we eat obviously can help us to feel more balanced and manage our hunger. If you are starving all the time, or if you are experiencing something where you feel like you go from extremes, like you get really full and then all of a sudden you're really hungry, or you're having a lot of cravings, it can be harder to hear what your body's trying to tell you, and it can be harder to manage your hunger. So imagine if you have a more steady level of hunger. Imagine hunger's coming in more slow and low. Imagine that the cravings are quite so strong. It's going to be easier to take a step back and be like, well, what's going to feel good for me right now? What do I want to eat? Versus feeling like we're sort of, at the whim of our hunger and our cravings, right? And so that's what I want to talk about today, is how to do that from a physiological standpoint. The way I've seen it for years personally, and I've really gotten more into teaching it recently, because sometimes you do something and you just don't realize that, like, oh, that's just a thing I do, and I should actually teach other people that. But learning nutrition years and years ago, what I realized is that when we combine our macronutrients in a certain way, and again, this is not going to be complicated. You don't have to count anything. You don't have to weigh anything. But when you combine your macronutrients in a certain way, it can help to stabilize blood sugar levels. And I'm going to talk about why that's important. So quick review, as I mentioned, carbohydrates, all carbohydrates, eventually break down into our body into something called glucose. And you might have heard this called blood sugar. We only find glucose really in our blood. And there's a certain amount that our body is good with. So too little, you might get that low blood sugar feeling, which, doesn't feel great. Too much can start to cause some issues as well, inflammation and just some other health issues we'll talk about in a minute. If you know anybody with diabetes, this is an issue, right? Especially type 1 diabetes, because what happens is when we eat a food, we get a little extra sugar in our blood, not a problem. Our central nervous system is paying attention to this, and it goes, oh, we got a little extra sugar in our bloodstream. We need to make sure we clean that up. So it releases a hormone from our pancreas called insulin, which I'm sure you've heard of. And insulin is wonderful. It's kind of like the maid. It comes in and it's going to clean up that extra sugar, and it's going to store it. I'll play this little video here. It's going to connect to our muscle and our liver, and these are the two places we store glucose. It becomes something called glycogen. And just like if you were cleaning up your room and you got stuff everywhere and you store it up, let's say in your closet and your dresser, we can also take it back out when we need it. So if we're in between meals and we need some energy, the pancreas will release a different hormone called glucagon. Think of glucagon like the butler. He's like, you're hungry? No problem. Let me go make you a meal, right? And he's able to pull out from the liver, from the muscles, some sugar for us, some energy for us. This is a beautiful cycle, right? The problem can be if we're having to use that MAID too often, right? If the blood sugar is getting too high too often because of being a little bit out of balance with what we're eating. So this is what we're trying to go for. You can see here, right? So when our blood sugar levels stay in this, what we would call maybe a healthy, normal range, most of the time, listen, our body's amazing. There's gonna be times when we eat the extra birthday cake and we get a little high blood sugar, our body can handle it. But for the most part, what we're trying to do throughout our days, you can see here, is keep that blood sugar pretty steady. When we do that, you should notice that you have a more even keel energy. I notice my energy is a little bit higher. Again, as I mentioned, a low, slow hunger versus that real rapid, high hunger, and reduced cravings. Because when insulin is released, insulin's job is to take up sugar. And so especially if we have a high release of insulin because we ate a lot of food that's going to cause our insulin levels to be high, now you got insulin kind of hanging out in your blood going, oh, well, my job is to look for sugar. Hey, eat some sugar, eat some sugar. So that can be something that is happening there. So again, what we're trying to do for the most part is keep it in this kind of low and slow, stable level throughout the day as much as we can. Okay, so again, how I want you to see this is when we eat a meal, specifically those carbohydrates are unpackaged in our digestive system. They are then released into the bloodstream, and that is when we release some insulin as well. And insulin is going to store up that extra sugar, no problem, in the liver and in muscle, and this is a beautiful process. Again, when we're eating in a way that's unbalanced, what can start to happen here is that the system gets a little bit overwhelmed, and all of a sudden what we start to see is that those storage centers can start to fill up. And they actually can. You can actually get to a point where you really just don't have a lot of extra room or any extra room in the muscle and in the liver to store up. And I can't remember the exact amount of calories. I think it's like for most people around 1,200 calories worth of glucose or glycogen in the liver. I can't remember. It's a little bit more for the muscle. So then what happens when these storage places are full? Well, at this point then your body is like, okay, cool. We are going to convert this and we'll go ahead and store it up in our fat stores, because our fat store factory is pretty much unlimited, right? As those fat cells can expand and grow and multiply. So that's where we're going to begin to store it. So that could cause some issues if you're noticing unwanted weight gain above your natural weight. That could be part of what's going on. As I mentioned, let me move myself out of the way here. You may also notice increased cravings because of that insulin. You may notice fatigue, inflammation, things like, maybe acne. That's not for everybody, but inflammation in the body is something that can happen from having this increased insulin levels, blood sugar levels, all of that. So there's a little bit more to it than that, but that kind of gives you a gist of what can be happening and why this is something that can be, I feel like, a way to partner with your body and really feel better and see some immediate results from that. So one of the things when we talk about balancing, and again, we're not going to get super into, having to track all of this and count macros or anything like that. But one of the great things with this is we can look at this in a sense of food abundance, meaning what do we add in instead of necessarily take away, right? Now, common sense prevails. If we're eating sugar all day long, we want to look at that. We want to see if we can swap some of that out. But one of the best things you can do is you can see here, fats, proteins, and fiber, which you're mostly going to find in vegetables, you find it in other things as well, are going to help to slow the release of the glucose into the blood. So again, you see here, we're releasing that sugar, and you think of these guys, protein, fat, and fiber, kind of like the bodyguards getting into the bloodstream. They're going to slow that down. Why is that so important? Well, that's important because the slower the sugar enters into the bloodstream, the less sort of dramatic release of insulin we have. And that's a good thing, right? We want both of those things to be kind of, again, slow and steady. So for example, let's do a practical example here. If I were to just eat a piece of bread, I'm probably going to get a pretty quick release of, glucose into my bloodstream. If I were to add to that piece of bread some peanut butter, an egg, some avocado, something like that, it is going to then change how quickly the glucose from that bread releases. It's going to slow it down. It's going to give me more balanced meal. Now, yes, I'm adding calories, but that is okay, because what I should notice is I feel fuller for longer, right? My hunger should ideally come a little bit slower and lower, and it should decrease the craving. So if I just eat the bread, what I'm going to notice is I get hungry faster. I may notice some fatigue, and then I may notice that my hunger comes in a little bit more rapid, or that I have more cravings throughout the day. So that's a simple place that you can start, is just looking at in every meal. And this is kind of how I view nutrition. And again, I don't want to paint a picture that I don't ever have sugar or unbalanced meals. I certainly do. What I try to do is look at, where's my protein? Can I add in a veggie? Do I have some healthy fats in this with whatever carbs I'm eating? And, with the carbs, sometimes it can be, is there a way to take something and swap it out for something that's a little bit slower releasing? Now, I don't do that at the sake of my satisfaction. So, for example, if I am just really craving pasta, I'm going to have some pasta. If I'm really craving pizza, I'm going to have some pizza. We had that last night. We went out, we had pizza. But what I try to do, if I can, is maybe have a little salad before, right? To give my body some fiber. Or if I'm going to have spaghetti night, maybe I add in, some broccoli or something with it, or before I eat it, just to help with that process. Other nights, I might be like, I'm much more in the mood for some zucchini noodles, and we can do that instead. So listen to your body, listen to what feels satisfying to you, but then you can play with this. You can have these little tools and these little tweaks to work with your body so that you can still have what you love, and then be nourishing your body, balancing out, managing your hunger in that way. So let me skip ahead here for just a second. Let me go past satisfied. Again, being satisfied, I think, is such an important part of this, but sorry, this is being a little slow. I wanted to skip ahead and give you 3 kind of takeaways here at the end. This is it. Okay. So if you want to kind of start playing around with this, the first thing I would say is start with your breakfast if you can. Breakfast literally means to break your fast. So when you do that is up to you. So hopefully you weren't eating in your sleep, right? So you've gone at least 8 hours or so without eating, and sometimes longer if you didn't eat, right before you went to bed. So in that time, your insulin levels have been really dropping really low. And so when we eat breakfast, we have this opportunity to kind of gently wake up our metabolism, versus, let's say, if I were to have some donuts for breakfast, I'm going to get this big rush of blood sugar, big rush of insulin, and it's kind of setting my day off on that, track of the big ups and the big downs. So if you're really craving a donut, have one, but maybe you're having that after you've had a more balanced breakfast. You maybe had some eggs and avocado and some fruit or whatever, and then you're like, oh, and then I'm going to have the donut afterwards. Okay. That's going to help so much. So I would start there. Now, again, when you eat breakfast, listen to your body. When you start to feel that hunger on the hunger scales, when I would recommend it. Focus on nutrients, not calories. So again, if you can add things in, they're going to help your meals be more balanced. Even if you feel like you're adding food, in the long run, it's going to help things balance out in a way that will give your body what it needs, versus having all these cravings, which may make you overeat. Okay, so focus on nutrients at each meal. How can you make it as balanced and nutrient dense as possible? With, again, still adding in some of those fun foods that you love. And then the last one, which I kind of mentioned already, enjoy sweets with a bodyguard. So if you can, for example, if you're going to have dessert, having it after a meal when you have probably some protein and fat and fiber in your stomach is going to slow down the release of that sugar, versus if you were to have it on an empty stomach. Now, again, there's going to be times when you just do, and that's fine. Your body can handle it, but that's a little tweak that you can do to where you're still enjoying the things that you love, but you're maybe doing it in a little bit of a gentler way for your body. Okay, so that is my quick and fast lesson on balancing blood sugar levels, and hopefully this will help you to start to manage your hunger if you are noticing those big extremes, both with hunger, with cravings. Obviously, it's a multifaceted approach. But to me, as I mentioned, I like this approach because it's a way to look at food where we are being food positive or adding in the foods that help our body. And it's also a way that I feel like, for me personally, I'm partnering with my body so that I feel my best and I'm still able to eat foods that I enjoy, but doing it in a way that just works a little bit better for me in terms of my bigger goal, which is honestly to get through my day and not feel exhausted. Okay, so hopefully that helps. As always, reach out to me with any questions, and I will talk to you soon. Next week we'll be talking about distinguishing hunger, so we'll be going a little bit more into how to distinguish between physiological hunger and emotional hunger, and what to do when we have those emotional eating episodes or cravings. All right, talk to y'all soon. Bye.